Hallo, Fräulein.
Was für eine schöne Nacht.
So allein, ohne Begleitung.
This was a flirtation that risked death, and also an act of the most unrestrained brutality. Two Nazis chased a woman like starving beasts, until she panicked and ran into her home. But they did not stop there, forcing their way inside, dragging the woman into the bedroom in front of her entire family with the intent to violate her, and brutally shooting her pleading father without mercy. What they did not realize was that as desperate cries echoed from the bedroom, the countdown on these two demons' lives had already begun. Killing Germans was undoubtedly courting disaster of the highest order, but they had no other choice, and in the end could only bury the bodies inside the house. What no one expected was that just a few days later, the young man who had killed Nazis in rage would see his fate completely reversed. Becoming a hero spoken of by many, the young man was named Elek, and the woman who had been chased was named Hannah, and they were both Jewish. A few days earlier, the two had met at a club in Budapest. At the time, Elek's brave defense of Jewish rights left a deep impression on Hannah, and the two developed feelings for each other. But after that night, they never saw each other again, because the very next day, Elek and his hometown friend Ferenc were forcibly dismissed by their boss, Joseph. The reason was that Budapest had become increasingly unsafe.
You must go home.
Wouldn't we be safer here than at the apartment?
Not the apartment. Home, to your village, to your families. You are not safe here.
Take the first train before they shut them down. Pay whatever you must, but get on board. Go.
And so, Elek was forced to give up his job at the record store and return to the remote countryside to hide. Just as Elek and Ferenc stepped into the village, they were celebrating that the countryside had not yet been completely controlled by the Germans, when in the next second they were stunned by a recruitment notice at the village entrance targeting Jews. In fact, as an Axis country, Hungary's domestic and foreign affairs were already firmly dominated by Germany, and all levels of government were carrying out Nazi wartime decrees, a reality that had become common knowledge. So when Elek expressed his worries about forced labor to his father dismissed them, telling him that serving was the duty of every Hungarian man, and that disobedience meant death. After all, labor service was still better than being sent to the front lines to fight the Soviets. His father's stance clearly showed that he had not yet realized how dire the situation for Jews had become. Seeing that his father could not be persuaded, and for the sake of the family's safety, Elek could only secretly seek help from Balaks, a member of the Jewish underground. With his help, Elek obtained baptism certificates for the whole family, hoping to add an extra layer of protection. After briefly enjoying the warmth of being reunited with his family, the next day Elek reluctantly joined the conscription group. Before leaving, he handed the baptism certificates to his sister, instructing her to present them if their father encountered trouble. After that, he and Ferenc were sent together to a Jewish labor camp near the western border.
This is a work camp. You will clear roads, lay track, construct bridges, and do anything your country needs. If you work hard, you will make it back to your families. If you try to escape, you will join them.
At the same time, the Germans introduced a series of discriminatory laws against Jews within Hungary. On this day, SS Lieutenant Colonel Eichmann directly summoned the head of the Jewish Council.
There will be certain restrictions placed upon Jewish activities, all of which are within Hungarian law interest.
Can you be specific as to these restrictions?
All Jews were forbidden from using radios or telephones, and were not allowed to travel. The Germans would also impose a curfew on Jews. Moreover, all Jews were required to wear a clearly visible Star of David. Eichmann warned that as long as Jews strictly followed these regulations, they would not be harmed because of their identity. After saying this, he dismissed the official, not even granting him a chance to show loyalty. However, Eichmann immediately turned around and summoned Szalasi, the leader of Hungary's far-right Arrow Cross Party. Between the lines of their conversation, they colluded openly, laying bare their criminal ambition to completely eliminate the Jews. Meanwhile, inside the labor camp, Elek and Ferenc endured Nazi enslavement day after day. They repaired railways and built fortifications, and the slightest mistake would earn them brutal beatings from the guards, or even cost them their lives. Then one day, the camp was suddenly bombed by Soviet forces, and chaos erupted everywhere. Seizing the opportunity, the two jumped into the raging river, but just as they climbed ashore and prepared to flee, the dark barrels of the guards' guns were aimed straight at them.
freedom now. Let's go our separate ways.
You gave him 5 more seconds than he deserved. Now, go home.
Miraculously escaping the labor camp, Alec and Ferenc ran joyfully toward home, their hearts filled with hope for reunion with their families. But what awaited them went far beyond their worst expectations, leaving only piercing pain and despair. Ferenc's family home had been forcibly occupied by villagers. His family's whereabouts were unknown, and he himself was driven away. Alec's home was nothing but ruins, with only a broken family photo frame buried in the rubble, along with the baptism certificates he had entrusted to his sister. Just as the two stood homeless and consumed by grief, they were spotted by Balax, a member of the resistance. Balax then told them everything that had happened in the village after they were sent to the labor camp.
It made sense to me then why they called up all the men for labor service. It was so easy for them to clear the town of women and children.
As they were considering what to do next, a sudden commotion erupted outside. Looking out the window, they saw the villager who had seized Ferenc's house approaching with gendarmes. And so, under cover of night, Alec and Ferenc climbed onto a train and returned to Budapest. Yet what disappointed them was that the entire Jewish district had already been cleared out, completely deserted. The record store was in ruins, abandoned and empty. Eventually, they learned that their former boss Joseph, like all the Jews of Budapest, had been relocated to the Yellow Star Apartments. On their way there, Alec unexpectedly ran into Hannah, whom he had met at the club. She happened to be living in the same building as Joseph. When Joseph, confined within the Yellow Star Apartments, saw Alec return to Budapest, he eagerly questioned him about the outside world. At that time, aside from occasionally receiving postcards from relatives who had been taken away, they had almost completely lost contact with the outside. Their only sense of safety came from protective passes issued by the Swedish. Alec then told everyone the truth, that Nazi persecution of Jews was escalating rapidly, and that the claim of relatives being taken away for better jobs was nothing but a lie. They had all been sent to Auschwitz. In the eyes of the Nazis, Jewish lives were now worth less than grass. That very night, a horrifying scene unfolded inside the Yellow Star Apartments. Hannah suddenly ran back in terror, and close behind her were 2 violent Nazi officers. What followed was the very scene shown at the beginning of the story. As a result, Hannah's father was shot dead, and Hannah escaped Nazi assault only because Alec risked his life to protect her. Unable to remain in the Yellow Star Apartments any longer, Alec buried the Nazis' bodies and fled with Hannah to her uncle's glass house. It was an annex of the Swiss embassy, protected by diplomatic immunity, and primarily used for producing passports. Alec's courage earned the admiration of Hannah's uncle, who then kept him on as an employee and entrusted him with distributing protective passports to Jews. Soon after, his close friend Ferenc joined him as well. In this way, Alec began saving more and more Jews through a different means. At the same time, his own safety was temporarily secured. But elsewhere, as German forces tightened their grip, Hungary's policies toward Jews became increasingly radicalized. One day, Hungarian Regent Horthy was directly threatened by the Nazis at his residence. They demanded that the government immediately abandon its lenient policies toward Jews and transfer full control over Jewish affairs to German hands. They also demanded that Horthy resign and allow Szalasi to take power. From that point on, the situation for Jews entered an extremely dangerous phase, with acts of persecution erupting at any time and in any place. One day, while delivering protective passports, Alec saved a boy who had survived under the muzzle of a Nazi gun. The boy's entire family had been shot dead in the street by German Nazis, simply for owning a radio, but the rescued boy had nowhere to go, because even Alec himself was still living in the glass factory. In the end, Hannah asked someone to send the boy to a monastery. Next, as the number of people changing nationality continued to rise, the Nazis grew extremely dissatisfied with Switzerland's immigration policies and soon summoned Regent Horthy again, along with the Swiss consul.
Colonel Eichmann will have to deal with this issue. You are to cease transferring citizenship until further notice. Failure to cooperate will have consequences.
During the negotiations, the Germans completely ignored Switzerland's reasonable demands and even openly disregarded Hungary's status as a sovereign nation. In the end, they warned them to immediately stop all nationality transfers, or bear the consequences, and then turned and left. After this encounter with the Germans, Horthy began shifting his attention toward the Allied powers, but in order to gain Soviet support, Hungary would still have to make enormous concessions. Meanwhile, Alec continued his mission of delivering travel passes to Jews. However, tragedy struck on this very day. Ferenc was spotted by the police during a delivery, and a search uncovered a large number of undistributed protective passes on him. From afar, Alec could only watch helplessly, unable to do anything. Ferenc was immediately thrown into prison. After Ferenc was arrested and jailed, the Swiss consulate did not issue any statement, because the political risk they would have to bear was simply too great. However, Alec firmly refused to give up.
Miklos was very clear about the risk.
We understand that. But we can't just leave him!
I know, but what can we do? The only people who can get near him now are the SS.
A single remark from Josef gave Alec an idea to rescue Ferenc. That very night, Alec dug up the buried Nazi corpse and took the uniforms from the bodies. Meanwhile, Josef shaved off his distinctly Jewish beard. Then, under the cover of night, they disguised themselves as SS officers and walked straight into the police station. But to their shock, just as they were about to interrogate Ferenc, the guard on duty told them that the newcomer had already been beaten to death. Hearing this, Alec instantly flew into a rage, which alerted the arrival of the prison warden. However, after understanding what had happened, the warden told Alec that he had been taken to the wrong cell. By a twist of fate, they managed to pull a barely alive Ferenc out of prison. Although Ferenc was successfully rescued, Alec's recklessness caused deep concern and strong dissatisfaction from Hannah's uncle.
We saved Ferenc!
Yes, and we're all very impressed. But when will you understand? Each time you save one, you risk thousands. You want to be a hero dressed up as a Nazi, fine, but not under this roof.
A few days later, Regent Horthy finally accepted the Soviet terms and signed a surrender agreement, allowing Soviet occupation. As soon as the news spread, cheers erupted inside the glass house, and it seemed the war was finally coming to an end. However, no one expected that surrendering to the Allies would provoke a brutal Nazi retaliation, because they would never accept losing Hungary as their strategic foothold. Very quickly, Hungary's situation took a sharp turn for the worse, as the Germans launched an armed assault on the regent's palace, occupied it, and arrested Horthy.
We cannot miss a single document connected with the Allies. Not a single one!
You are a traitor to Hungary and your allegiance with the Führer.
It is the Führer that has betrayed this country. There's nothing you can do now. My son has already delivered the armistice documents to the Allies.
Yes?
The Germans used Horthy's son as leverage, forcing him to ultimately submit.
Don't sign it!
Tragically, before the radio announcer could even finish reading the ceasefire announcement with the Allies, he was thrown out of the building by members of the Arrow Cross. In the end, with German backing, the Nazi Arrow Cross Party seized power and immediately implemented extreme nationalism and pro-Nazi policies, unleashing unprecedented persecution against Jews. They could be arrested anytime and anywhere, and every day tens of thousands of Jews were sent to the gas chambers of Auschwitz. Alec's parents, his sister, and his younger brother were all brutally persecuted to death. At this point, the glass house could no longer accommodate the ever-growing number of refugees. One day, while Hannah's sister was comforting the refugees, she was forcibly taken away by police during a sudden raid. Looking into Hannah's helpless eyes, Alec once again pulled out the German uniform, his final bargaining chip to save her sister. However, this time, the arrests were no longer the same as before. Captured Jews were no longer sent to prison, but directly escorted to execution sites. The sister waited in utter terror for death to arrive. Suddenly, a shout rang out.
Stop! These Jews are protected by Swiss passports.
Who cares about the Swiss? The Arrow Cross is in charge.
The Reich is in charge! The Führer is in charge! And he will not have his interests with Switzerland jeopardized by a bunch of drunks in uniform!
Despite Alec giving everything he had to save her, he still failed. The sister was ultimately shot dead by Nazi police, and Hannah and her mother once again fell into the grief of losing a loved one. Although a single German uniform could not change anything, and could not even protect one girl, Alec did not give up. He decided to take the initiative. He needed to know the truth, to understand exactly where the Nazis were sending their families. He resolved to continue rescuing people, saving as many as he could. So once again, he put on the German uniform, setting his sights on a club frequently visited by German officers. There, he planned to gather information and formulate a course of action. Inside the club, Alec remained confident and composed, and ultimately uncovered a horrifying plan. They intended to eliminate all Jews in and around Budapest within 6 days. After learning this, Alec stayed awake all night. At dawn, he led others into the ruins, stripped German uniforms from fallen soldiers, mobilized the refugees to put on the disguises, and hastily formed a fake German unit to launch immediate rescue operations. Early that morning, Alec and his group intercepted a Jewish convoy being escorted to the train station. To avoid suspicion, Alec even pretended to use force to threaten resisting Jews.
Please don't take my children.
No talking.
Please, sir, please let us go.
Stop!
I'm a Jew. You'll be all right.
In this way, once Alec put on the German uniform, he worked day and night rescuing Jews, and the number of people saved kept growing. Every person pulled back from the brink of death was filled with gratitude toward Alec. However, during one rescue operation, Alec once again encountered the Nazi police officer who had killed Hannah's sister.
Stop the firing!
Why are we stopping?
Lieutenant, you're here to stop me again?
Are you questioning me?
I have a job to do.
Your job is to take orders from me.
A fierce gunfight immediately erupted between the two sides. Although Alec personally shot and killed his enemy, he also witnessed his teammates fall amid the storm of bullets. At this moment, Ferenc, having felt the brutality of battle firsthand, finally broke down and began to waver about the endless rescues. Compared to fighting on, he would rather wait for the war to end in prayer. However, Alec firmly insisted that they had to keep fighting. Overwhelmed by grief, Ferenc cried out in anguish.
Why? Why do we have to? We've saved so many people already.
But there are more people out there.
There will always be more, Alec. You cannot stop the Nazis. They will continue to kill us with or without your efforts. And why does it have to be you? Why are you doing this?
Because I have nothing left!
Soon, the Nazis began targeting the Jews sheltered by the glass house. In one escorted group of Jews, with the cooperation of the Swiss consul, Alec ordered the escorting police to allow the consul to take away all Jews holding Swiss passports. After driving off the inspecting officers, large numbers of Jews left the convoy with protective passes, and some even escaped with nothing more than a scrap of paper. However, just as the rescue was about to be completed, a squad of SS troops happened to pass by. Under their harsh interrogation, Alec was no longer able to explain himself and could only order those posing as passport holders to be gathered together for later execution, attempting to bluff his way through. Yet the SS gave Alec no such chance. Thinking back on more than 100 living people who were slaughtered before his eyes while he was powerless to save them, Alec spent the entire night consumed by deep self-blame. By November 1944, the German army on the Eastern Front was clearly losing ground, and the Nazi leadership had begun retreating toward Berlin, but they still deployed heavy forces in Budapest. At the same time, pro-German armed groups led by the Arrow Cross formed a stubborn resistance force. On this day, before departing, SS Lieutenant Colonel Eichmann warned the deputy left behind, who showed signs of disobedience, that he must strictly follow the marshal's orders and defend Budapest to the last man. Thus, a desperate and brutal battle of resistance began. At this time, Alec was still disguised as a Nazi officer, searching for every possible chance to rescue people. That day, Alec attended an Arrow Cross oath-taking rally and obtained another crucial piece of intelligence. The Arrow Cross completely disregarded international diplomatic norms, tore off their disguise, and carried out a massacre at the glass house under Swiss sovereignty. Although the consul stepped in to stop the violence of the Nazi police, Hannah's uncle was still shot dead on the spot. Meanwhile, Alec, who had infiltrated the German ranks to carry out rescues, was suddenly caught in a fierce Soviet assault, with bullets pouring down like a torrential rain. In the end, Alec curled up among piles of German corpses and narrowly survived the bombardment. It was not until midnight that he made his way back to the shattered glass house. When he learned that Hannah and Joseph were still out rescuing children from the monastery and had not returned, Alec rushed once more into the streets engulfed by gunfire. Under the cover of the bombarded night, Hannah led the children from the monastery toward the glass house with great difficulty, only to be suddenly stopped by Nazi police. They thought the protective passes would get them through the inspection.
These passports. We are Jews. No.
But instead, all the children, along with the nuns and the priest, were forced into a corner. A bloody scene was about to unfold, when at the critical moment, Alec arrived in time and shouted for the Nazi police to stop. Unexpectedly, Alec's furious reprimand drew the direct intervention of an SS lieutenant. Upon learning that the dispute involved Jews, the SS officer immediately ordered their execution without hesitation. With no other options left, Alec was forced to take his most dangerous step yet. Just as both sides stood on the brink of violence, the arrival of the deputy in charge once again eased the situation. However, a single remark from the SS lieutenant deeply provoked the deputy, and ultimately cost him his life.
Lieutenant, let these people go.
I follow Colonel Eichmann's orders.
Eichmann has fled, you fool. I'm in command now.
The deputy ordered everyone to return to their combat positions. Though unwilling, the SS officer finally gave up his insistence, but just as he turned to leave, a child's cry brought everything to an end.
Alec, come with us, back to the glass house.
Alec!
The time comes to 1957, in New York City, United States. At a wedding ceremony, the bride is surrounded by love, happily imagining the future. The groom's eyes are filled with tears, and he is the very boy who shouted on the streets of Hungary 13 years earlier. Choking back emotion, he gives thanks to one man, someone who walked among the enemy yet saved hundreds and thousands from Nazi oppression, his adoptive father, Alec. The film slowly comes to an end here. All those who suffered misfortune are, in the end, brought together again by fate. This film is adapted from real historical events, and its character is based on a Hungarian Jewish youth named Rosenbaum. At just 21 years old, he infiltrated behind enemy lines under a false identity and successfully saved thousands of his people. He later became known as the Master of Disguise, and those interested in this history can look up the relevant historical records. I am a film enthusiast. Thank you for subscribing to my channel, and I will see you next time.